Okay, thanks for inviting me along today. We're in the southwest. We've got a consortium together looking into the development of local TV. We haven't got anywhere near as far as some people have spoken today. But the thing we're very interested in is the research part of this. That's kind of where we are. So before we take local TV forward, we're doing lots of little research things. And one of the research things is me coming here today. But I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things we've found out about local TV, and particularly what Steve asked me to do is talk a bit about what we found out about local TV in America. So let's move on. First thing about the research we're doing, I'll just tell you a little bit about this, is that the research, although it's focused on local TV in one way, it actually started by looking at education and asking the question, do our education courses, are they actually designed so students could go and work in local TV? So we're kind of looking at it that way, and we've come across some interesting things, like, for example, in further education at level 3, which is A level, there is a course which is called media production, and on it, the students are all assessed on that course over a period of 2 years. And in those 2 years, each student has to pass 72 summative assessments in order to get the qualification. Which adds up to 1,440 summative assessments the teacher has to make over the period of the course. Now, when you look at that and you ask, how much time have those students got then to go and work in local TV? The answer is, not much. So that's kind of been interesting. Okay. So one of the things we did is we looked at the United States, and we came across a number of examples. One of them is Germantown TV, which is in Missouri. It's been going since 1982, which is quite a long time. It wins loads of national awards. It kind of sweeps the board with national and local TV awards. It's based in a high school, so it's a bit like a further education college, only it starts younger. The courses are designed. Some of the courses are actually designed so that the students go and work in local TV. So they don't start from, we're the educationalists, we know what you need to learn, here's the course, here are all the summative assessments. They start from, here's a local TV station, let's see if we can build a course that would allow our students to actually go and work. It's a very interesting way to start, I think. Okay, so this is an extract from the contract that all the students are given. Before they work out, I'll let you read it rather than me reading through it. Apparently you can read through it, then I can speak. Okay. When you read through this contract, what you see is that there is an expectation of what the students do in local TV. And that expectation is like the same expectation you might get if you were employed by the BBC, because they recognise that once you're in local TV, you become part of the local community, you are seen by the local community, and the local community expects you to conduct yourself in the way that they see people being, well, mainly conducting themselves in the media. So there's quite a high expectation of the students who get involved in this. This is the grade assessment criteria that they use. You can skim through that. And when you compare it with some of the grade assessment criteria that we have over here, this seems to be quite a lot simpler. Again, because it comes from the idea that the local TV is there for students to go and work in, it simplifies what you have to do, so you don't have to start with the education perspective. Okay, course structures. They've actually structured their course over 4 years. So students start when they get to the high school, and then the first year they're kind of given this contextual stuff, which is 80% bookwork, 20% hands-on. That becomes in the second year 70% hands-on and 30% bookwork. And then in years 3 and 4, they're basically into production. And when they join the production team, they have a mentor who's already got to year 4, a student mentor who mentors them when they start year 3. And the whole aim of this is by the time they get to year 4, they're running local TV station. 1 minute, okay. Okay, so next steps for us as a research team, and we've got 2 research teams going at the moment, is we're looking at bids for funding to develop a model of provision that we think might suit the Southwest. Because when you look at the American models, culturally, they all kind of fit into the culture that they come from. We're working on challenging the current structure of courses, particularly at level 3, level 2 and level 3. And we're rewriting our higher education courses so that we can easily fit our students into the opportunities that we hope local TV will present.
Thank you very much.
And in a similar sort of vein, work has been done over here at Winchester. Will explain the kind of work that she's been doing in looking at how the possibilities are for more student engagement in these sorts of projects, which she'll explain.
The dubious distinction of being not that much higher than the left, actually. I'm very conscious that I've got quite a grand title, which is something like How We Would Do It on the South Coast. And I would be delighted to tell you how we do it in the South, if only I actually knew. What my research has been focused on has been, I'm afraid, a slightly dry title, and I apologise because I've just realised the person who came up with the title is in fact here, so sorry about that. It's a really good title, honest, and its full title was in fact Problems, Potential and Possibilities, because we love alliteration. I'm looking forward to hearing Ian Anderson later, because he is going to be talking about his own study into how universities are responding and what stage they're at. And I have to say, particularly compared with some of the talks that we've heard this morning, we're at a comparatively very early, very rudimentary stage. I've been fortunate enough to see what they're doing at Sunderland, and it is genuinely very, very exciting. I think we're further back in the food chain, and that may be the experience of some other people here as well. Inevitably, as I've been encountering in the course of doing my research, there are people who have been kind of the pioneers forging across the sort of great media prairie, and then there's the other people who are still looking for the TV power button, both kind of literally and metaphorically, really. Higher education, as we all know, is increasingly being called upon to prove that without shirking its commitment to academic rigour, that it's got some real vocational relevance, and that has been a great struggle. I think what we have been telling students for many years, and obviously this isn't all institutions, but we've been telling them, here, in 3 years' time, is where you're going to work, or where you could work. But in the meantime, this is where you're going to train. And we showed them something perhaps rather dry, or rather dusty, or rather further from reality. And we expect them to join up the dots. And to their credit, very often they can. It may not look the same, but they can tell that it's a gallery. They can tell the pedestals may not be the same, but they can see it's a TV studio, and they throw themselves into it with a huge amount of gusto. So obviously, they are one of our biggest resources. As we know, this is kind of, I think as Fred said as well earlier on, they very often are the driving force. Now, we're facing these decisions about how far we go in replicating what the industry is doing. How far do you stay at university, and how far do you then venture into it at the area which makes you, in terms of your practice-based teaching, into really more of a training centre? Is that the right way to go? A lot of universities are still struggling to talk about that, even rather than actually doing anything. They're still, shall we, shan't we? We know the water's there, we're a little nervous even of dipping our toes in. In Winchester, what has been done, I have to say, and I think Brian's going to talk, my colleague Brian Thornton's going to talk about this a little bit later on, where there has been innovation, it's been very much in the area of journalism, and perhaps that's one of our keys. And possibly also radio. I think, again, the experience of some other institutions, radio is very often where things tend to start and get going. It's a good sort of proving ground. Winchester itself, as a city, has got a lot to offer. In the southeast, which obviously we all know is the wealthiest part of the country, we actually have quite a high, even compared to the rest of the southeast, let alone the rest of the country, we have a high GVA, our gross value added, per head of population, is higher than average than the rest of the south. We have a higher gross weekly full-time pay for residents. We're doing quite well, but again, not only compared to the rest of the UK, but just compared with the rest of the South East. We have a high job density. But as I can testify, I think I probably demonstrate it beautifully myself, we're small. We're very small. And size really is important. We have in Winchester a city population of somewhere in the region of 115,000. We have a population that's growing, but it's not exploding. So something like 5.5% growth, a whole 5.5% expected by 2017. So even by the most optimistic estimates, that really doesn't make us big enough to support particularly a DTT television channel. That doesn't rule out the possibility of ploughing our own furrow in IPTV terms or in YouTube terms, but it does make us perhaps a little bit too small to support a DT channel ourselves. So we have a couple of possibilities, and that does involve working in partnership. One possibility being stepping out of the shadow of Southampton. For years we've been underserved in Winchester in terms of local provision. The last 10 years of radio stations have been a history of sort of closures and sell-offs. But if we step out of the shadow and perhaps work with some of our colleagues there, we have the other challenge of how we bridge the gap between local and regional. But I don't think that that is insurmountable. We have a larger population there, 236,000. They have a strong media production department. We have a strong journalism department, and though we're small, that's what we kind of bring to the party. So I think the area that I was actually asked to look at, if I sort of go back to my original title, was publishing, university as publisher broadcasters. If I just finish off by taking you back in time, where my research started was actually somewhere in the mid-1400s. I hasten to add, not me myself, but what I was looking at. Johannes Gutenberg built his first movable type press. And it was a century later, nearly, in 1534, that Cambridge University was granted a royal charter to appoint its own printer. It was then another 50 years, 1584, before they printed a book. So not exactly a speedy process. It would be very difficult to argue that the universities led the printing revolution. But what they do have is staying power. They have the might and main to remain, as well as those other resources, including the students and the facilities themselves. Not quick on the uptake, but Cambridge University Press, though they didn't jump on the bandwagon straight away, is still around, and now the oldest publishing house in the world. So I felt some kind of chord of sympathy as I read that, because I felt very often that's how universities operate, not just then, but now too. And I know that the call was very much for the Culture Secretary to be brave, and I think universities and other institutions need to be brave too. So rather than joining at the end sort of questions, I think I'm not in a position to answer questions, very much in a position to be asking them. So rather than delivering strategy, all suggestions are welcome at the end of the talk.